One of the hardest questions you're gonna ask yourself when you first start 3D printing is, what should I 3D print? I mean, this is something I ask myself all the time, and I've been printing for several years now. And before you go printing something cool like a clockwork dragon or something, it's good to warm up, to start with prints that can kind of help you ease into bigger prints or more complicated prints. So of course, I made a list of things that can help you do just that. Hey, it's me, Danny, the 3D Printing DM. Welcome to 3D Printed Tabletop, a channel where we cover all things 3D printing for your tabletop games. The prints on this list are simple, fun, functional, free, which is always nice, and most importantly, they're gonna give you valuable experience. And if you're a seasoned printer, I wouldn't count this list out just yet. After a while of doing any hobby, you can get kind of lazy. At least in my experience. Going through all of these prints in this exercise was a really good thing for me to revisit the basics. And at the end of the day, these are fun prints, I mean that, okay? I mean, look at this, look at this. Whee! Done, there you go. On to the list. This is a multi-purpose container by ZeusAndHisBeard. I love this model because it's relatively quick print, super versatile. This is a perfect gift to your players or to yourself. And this is a really nice test print for tolerances and bridging. When I printed this, the part on the inside was pretty weak. See? Truth is, this is still very functional and very cute. Again, this is on the list to test your bridging and also to give you something simple to start with and to test your tolerances. Of course, I've got to have some minis and mini related things on this list. Let's start with something simple. Tabletop Condition Indicators by thelukec. I always forget things like concentration. I can't be the only DM that has this issue. So these markers. These are really easy prints if you print them one at a time. But these are really on the list so you can experience full build plate printing and test your bed adhesion, your bed level, and your live leveling to fix and tweak these things. Remember when I mentioned going back to the basics? Look at this beauty. Let me show you. This is what happens when your bed isn't level. If only we had two more, we'd have an Olympics logo. All right, let's go to actual minis. There are so many that you can use to test print or to get started. And if you're printing resin, you've probably already found some pre-supported minis that were like your starter minis, right? But in terms of prints that are free, I would say BriteMinis is my favorite source of free minis that are supportless and a good starting place for people who are just getting into it and want some minis. These three orcs, I think they're a nice balance of printability and detail for FDM printers. And of course I had to print them in this orc green, right? And then another supportless mini to test, this Bugbear. Some of you may recognize this Bugbear. This is from one of our Kickstarters, Lost Adventures Volume 1. It's also supportless and free on our website. This Bugbear was made by Andrea of Artisan Guild, who's an incredible sculptor. These prints are meant to test things like your stringing, detail on FDM printers, which if you're gonna print minis on FDM, then this is a great place to start, I think. For reference, these were printed at 0.1mm layer height on a Simplify 3D profile that I'm testing. Pretty happy with how they turned out, all things said and done. All right, next up is this life counter by Scottimus on Thingiverse. I gotta say, this one made the list because I wanted to use it as an event countdown. The gnolls are bashing through the door. They'll be done in 4 rounds. And I also saw this being really good like with teenage kids at the table or the people who are obsessed with stacking dice during the game. Y'all know what I'm talking about. But printing this, trying to assemble it, it really challenged me. My print didn't end up very functional and I didn't have time to try and reprint this and get it functional. This is just something I ran out of time in, but the prints themselves are really easy and overall this is a really good project for things like tolerance and trying difficult prints that are mechanical in nature, but can still be used at your table in any which way that I think would be really fun for your players, and for you. For the uninitiated, this is a dice tower. This is meant to be able to do this, okay? It just makes rolling dice funner. There's a lot of dice towers and dice tower versions that you can find online that are easy to print, but I had to narrow this down. So I chose the following. This is a Fate's End dice tower by Kimbolt. Full disclosure, I love all of Kim's towers so much. I backed their Kickstarter and I asked her to come make props for us for Lost Adventures Volume 1. But this is one of my favorite dice towers that's available. It was a sample from her Kickstarter. It's on the list because it's fancy, it's large. Honestly, this works as terrain too, but it's here to challenge you to not be as afraid of printing things with longer print times. It's really common for people who are new to be afraid of prints that take, longer than 8 hours or so because they're afraid of it failing, of losing filament, things like that. And that's always a risk, but you gotta get past it because the payoff is worth it to print things like this. It is worth it. For those of you who don't want something as bulky, I present to you a minimalist dice tower by A. Clugston 519. Now, as you can see, this is 2 pieces that go together and they all store neatly in this box. I discovered this dice tower on Reddit, and even though this is a minimalist design, it requires some assembly. Ended up being a really good tolerance test that was more forgiving than the counter. I think it's really good to have projects like this to be able to practice assembling because there's a lot of things that are functional and require this kind of assembly. So this is a really good place to start, I think. You can put all sorts of stuff in here. It doesn't have to just be dice or dice towers. Now, I'm not really a drinker, but we're almost halfway through the list. So it's time to celebrate with our next print. Cheers. All right. This is a barrel can holder by Ars Moriendi. They also have a Lion's Brew mug, which I didn't quite print out just yet, but still on this list for the same reason that this one is. This is an easy win, no thin parts, it looks cool, and it's fun to have for game night. Now this next half is all about immersion. If you want to recreate the sets you see on Critical Role, well, you're gonna need more on this list. But this is a great start. Of all the things on this list, this next item is probably the most used of everything on my table since day one. Trees. This is a free tree that we have on our website, lostadventures.co. And this is another example of a great print with a great payoff. And it's really easy to print. It's support list too. If you want a simpler version of this tree that maybe isn't so big, the baby version. This is a tree for Gloomhaven by Robagon. This little tree brings me back to my Link to the Past days. Another thing that works in pretty much any setting, rocks. This next thing does rock, but they're actually rocks. There's a bunch of rocks online. I like these because they're simple, usable, and I like them for the same reason that I like the next set of items, which is ruins. These rocks and these ruins are made by a studio called Maker's Anvil. They are very easy to print. The rocks, everything, the textures, it's a little chunkier. It reminds me of like World of Warcraft, and that's my vibe. I love it. There's so few people that make stuff styled like this, much less that's free, that this as a set just works so well. Like for example, you could put these with these little trees and it would just look ace. Maker's Anvil also has a Patreon with a lot more stuff, but this is the stuff that's available for free. That's why these are on here, because collectively they are a really good cohesive set that is easy to print and more forgiving than some of the stuff that's more realistic. Really, these are perfect for beginners. All right, it's time to enter the dungeon. If you're one of those people that bought a printer just for tiles, I can tell ya, this video is not gonna be it for you. This is just for somebody who wants something fun, quick, to experience a little bit of the dungeon tile feel. Here is my recommendation if you're one of those people and you just wanna give it a shot. These are ClickLock dungeon tiles by Daandruff, AKA Marcus Koth. I probably pronounced your name wrong. Please forgive me. Look, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I haven't glued these down, so don't hate, okay? These are probably the cutest dungeon tiles that I've seen. It helps that they printed in marble. It's got this like cathedral, chapel type feel. I know, I do this stuff in games too, you guys. These print a lot faster than normal dungeon tiles, use less material, much simpler setup. Unfortunately, Marcus, the guy who made these, he's not as active these days. So if you want like a full ecosystem, this is a simpler set. If you want more variety, check out my video on the evolution of dungeon tiles for a whole bunch of other options. Now, to be honest, I'm not really much of a dungeon tile kind of guy. That's why you haven't seen very much of it on this channel. I prefer these things called DungeonSticks. Got a little wiggly. I'm a very, here's a sketch in my DM book and some scribbles, some monsters on it, and then wing the rest kind of DM. So having whole rooms prepped ahead of me just makes me feel like I'm putting the terrain before the journey. So these dungeon sticks are my go-to for more organic feeling dungeons, rooms, caves, whatever I want to use it for. These are really good to test your entire bed's adhesion and to test printing a whole bunch of things at once, because these are the perfect type of print that you want to print multiples of at the same time, so you're not constantly having to go back and press print every time. One other thing to say, dungeon sticks have gone through a number of versions, and they're easier to print than when I first printed them because of a lot of the issues I just mentioned. They're still a very good print to test and to try and print a whole bunch of at the same time. And even if you do use dungeon tiles, they're really flexible and really versatile as drop-on scatter. I know I left a lot off this list, but making it was still a lot of fun. It was honestly also a great exercise for me. I meant that when I said it at the beginning of the video. And I hope that there's one or more things on this list that you decide to print and give a shot and hopefully gain something from. You can find a list of all the prints down in the description. If you haven't already, leave a comment below with your favorite beginner print that you would add to this list. Or multiple, maybe there's a few of them that you want to add on here. If you want to support the channel, the best way to do so is to purchase one of our late pledges or some files through our website, lostadventures.co, and you can also support us on Patreon as well. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Happy printing and happy gaming. These things rock.